Why did you bring us here?
You're here because your family belongs here.
That's a fucking weird way to put it.
What did she want from me?
If I were you, I wouldn't want to get hurt even more.
Cuckoo is the newest horror film that hit theaters. It's directed by Tillman Singer, and it stars Hunter Schafer from Euphoria fame as Gretchen. Now, Gretchen is a girl that was living with her mom in America until very recently when her mom passed away. And so at the start of this movie, she has to move to the German Alps to live with her dad and his new family, his wife and his daughter. Now, when she gets to the German Alps, she finds out that the reason her dad is living there is because he's putting together these blueprints for a very wealthy developer who's trying to revamp this resort and hotel that's in the German Alps. Now, this wealthy developer is played by Dan Stevens, and his name in this movie is Mr. Koenig. Now, Mr. Koenig feels bad for Gretchen when she gets there. He sees her as sort of a person that's out of place. He knows she just went through this traumatic event with her mom, and so he feels bad for her, and on the surface, he seems like a pretty decent guy. He comes to her and he's like, you know what? I would like to give you a job at one of my resorts. You'll be at the front desk of one of the hotels, and there's only really one sort of thing you can't do, and that's you can't be the person who closes the hotel, because the person who closes the hotel at the end of the night needs to be able to get in a car and drive back, because the roads at night, they're not very safe. And since you only have a bicycle, well, you'll have to leave before 10. And Gretchen's like, you know what? That's weird, but okay, I'll take the job. She wants something to sort of take her mind off of everything going on. So Gretchen takes the job at the hotel at the front desk, and she gets to meet some new people, and everything seems to be going okay. And she tells the girl that's supposed to be closing for the night, you know what, I'll take your shift. You know, I'll get a little extra cash. You can go party or whatever you're going to do, and I'll close the hotel for the night. But one thing leads to another. She falls asleep at the desk, forgets to lock things up by 10 o'clock, and now she has to bike home past 10 o'clock, and she doesn't think much of it. She leaves, and as she's biking home, well, things go from bad to worse, because not only are the roads dark and kind of dangerous, like Mr. Koenig had said, but there's something on those roads that's hunting people that are on the roads at night. Now, that's the only thing I can say about this movie, because honestly, if I give you any more, I'll start to spoil the movie. If you've seen the trailer in the movie, you've seen some pretty decent scares from the film, so I won't go into any of them here. I don't want to spoil anything in this movie, but there are some decent scares on that bike ride home, and that really sets the tone for the rest of the film. Now, if that sounds like an interesting horror film to you, well, you should go check this movie out. It is currently playing in theaters. And with that said, let's get into my positives and some of my negatives. First positive I have was pretty much the acting all around in this film, but specifically from Hunter Schafer and from Dan Stevens. Now, Dan Stevens just recently starred in Abigail, and I thought he was really decent in that film, and I thought he did a great job in this movie. So if horror is his sort of wheelhouse, and he's going to keep being in horror films for the next couple of years, I think we're in for a treat, because I think he's a great actor. On the other side of things, you have Hunter Schafer, who I've only known from Euphoria as Jules, and I loved her character in that show. Where's the next season, HBO? What are you doing? But in this movie, you have her as Gretchen, and I think she also will be a big name in horror if she chooses to continue making horror films, because she can act so damn well. So I'm looking forward to more Dan Stevens and Hunter Schafer in the future. So if you want to see a good outing by both of those actors in this film, you should definitely check out this movie. Next positive I have for this movie is going to be the great outdoor cinematography and the awesome sets that they had throughout this film, and I'll elaborate on both of those. So on the great cinematography of the outdoors, I thought it was fantastic the way they shot the German Alps. Like, I don't know if they actually filmed there, but, and I couldn't, if you lined up a picture of this movie and a real picture of the German Alps, I probably wouldn't be able to tell you, but I liked the landscape. So again, wherever they did shoot this thing, it looked beautiful. It really did. So outside, you've got this beautiful landscape, and the director makes sure to take his time to show you that landscape, to live in that world for a few seconds before each shot. And I really liked that in this movie, because if they were transitioning from scene to scene, he might give you just a little bit of the look of the landscape of the film, and I liked that. You see one moment in particular that's sticking out in my head where Gretchen accepts the job at the resort, and you hear her working inside the resort, but it's just a shot of the resort with the German Alps behind, and it's beautiful. It really is. So again, the cinematography in this film is great. And on the other side of things, with the sets you have in this film, I thought those were also done really well, because in each location that Gretchen spends her time, every set is very different. You know, the house she's living in is very modern and very clean, and the resort she works in is very dirty, very dingy. Now, of course, Dan Stevens is developing this resort so that he can make it better, but if you go right down the road to this medical facility, well, guess what? This facility is very sparkly clean, and it's just interesting to see the different contrasts of places that she's at in this film, where the hospital maybe represents hope, maybe represents a little bit of help for her, and it's so clean and perfect. And on the side of the resort, maybe it represents a little bit of dread for her. She doesn't want to be there, and so it's dirty and dingy. And I think that was a direct decision by the director to have those places look so very different in this film, outside of the fact that one's a hospital and one's a sort of rundown motel. I thought that worked for me as well, and it set the tone for each scene that I was in. Oh, that was me, at least. My next positive is going to be the scares in this movie. This isn't a jump scare a minute sort of movie, and those movies have their place, but this is more of a slow burn horror film, so when you get the scares, they really need to hit to keep you invested in this horror film, and I think they do a good job. Right off the bat, there's a bathroom door scare in the movie. That's not much of one, but after that, you get a really good scare on that bike trail I was telling you about. That one was probably my favorite scare of the entire movie. I loved that one. But throughout the movie, as the movie unravels, it gets more and more unsettling, and you get these moments where you get these good scares, and as a horror fan, I appreciated that, because sometimes you get these slow burn horror films and there's nothing scary about them, and you're just like, oh, all right, well, it's supposed to just be unsettling. That's the scariness. But this movie understood that it needs to be unsettling while also giving you some decent scares throughout the film. My next positive is going to lead into my first negative, so we'll talk about the plot of this film. I thought it was very interesting how they sort of told this story that kept you on the edge of your seat by unraveling a little bit at a time throughout the runtime of this film. At least on the first viewing of this film, the movie felt like it was very much so giving you so little that you had to hang on every word from the characters to sort of understand where this movie was going to go. And that worked for me too. Again, slow burn horror movie, you kind of expect that. It's going to be unsettling, it's going to have some scares, and it's going to have a very slow moving plot so they can give you that 1-2 punch at the end. Unfortunately, that's where we get into my negatives, and my first negative for this film is that this movie was very much so you're going to have to connect the dots at the end of this film. And that's why if you saw my out of the theater reaction that I did for this movie on my YouTube Shorts page, well, it's sort of like, I don't know how I feel about this movie, because I felt like I had to unravel it in my brain still connect the different dots. And the whole way home, we turned the radio off and my wife and I talked about this movie, and we were just like, so do you think this, and this because this, and this? And she was like, yeah, I think that this, and this because this, and this. And I was like, maybe. And so in the last 24 hours, when I thought about this film before this review, I came to the realization that I think the director wanted you to fill in some of those gaps yourself, and I don't know if I like that. So on the one hand, it's like, okay, cool, because as a viewer, I can say, okay, this is this because this. And on the other hand, another viewer can look at it and interpret it a completely different way. That works in most movies, but I feel like in this movie, the director throws so much at you in this film, like, hey, there's something going on with Dan Stevens. Not everything's on the level. On Gretchen's side is a lot of depression because of her mother. She wants to go home, but she can't. And then even her father, he's got like this loyalty to Dan Stevens to a fault. And so there's a lot of really interesting themes in the plot in this film. But at the end, my negative has to be that the director just makes you fill in the gaps, makes you connect the dots yourself. And while doing that, while it may have created this web of interesting ideas, it doesn't really give you any sort of closure at the end. You're just kind of sitting there at the end like, all right, I guess I'll figure it out on my own, or maybe I'll see it a second and third time, and then I'll connect the dots. But I just feel like some people are going to say, oh, I got this movie right away. And I don't know how you could, because again, I think the director left this up to the interpretation of the viewer to a fault. But other than that, there weren't any other real negatives for me in this film, at least not on the first viewing. Again, maybe if I watch this movie a second time, then I'll be able to point out some things that I don't think are consistent with each other, or maybe there's something that I wish he had done a little bit differently. But on first viewing of this film, leaving this movie, the thing that bothered me the most was that the director didn't really give you any sort of closure in this film, and that's really my only negative, because I think if he had given you just a little bit more, I'm not saying you have to spoon feed me the entire ending viewing of this film and leave nothing up for debate, I'm not saying you have to do that, but if you just gave me a little bit more in this film, if you gave me just a little bit more of the idea of where he wanted this film to go, then I think maybe I would have felt more satisfied in this film. Overall, I had a decent enough time with this film, and I would say that if you like those art house style horror films where it's sort of a slow burn, not a lot of scares, but enough uneasy tension throughout the film, then you'll enjoy this movie and you should go check it out in theaters. However, if you're not a big fan of that style of horror, if you like your jump scares or you like things explained to you a little bit more, then maybe this won't be the movie for you. I would still recommend it, just maybe on streaming, rent it when it comes out on streaming. Either way, I had a decent enough time with it. I'm looking forward to my next viewing of this film. It's one that I might even put on my shelves back there. Like, it's one that I want to be in that world a little bit more before I say definitively if this movie is one of my favorite horror films of the year or not. But those are just my opinions because that's my review for Cuckoo. Guys, if you had a chance to see this film, if you have, let me know in the comment section down below. I'm very interested what other people think about this film because maybe my positives and my negatives line up with yours, or maybe you found something else in the movie. Again, since it's more of a choose your own destination at the end of this film, then maybe you picked something else out of this film that I didn't, and I'm very curious what other people think about Cuckoo. But with that said though, guys, if you like this review and you want to watch more, don't forget to hit the like button because it helps the video, it helps the channel, and it helps me right here. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Alright guys, we get to the end of my Cuckoo movie review, and this is one that I think I'll have to watch again in the future, and maybe it's one I'll make another video for in the future if I watch it again and I feel like I've got a few more things to say. Very well could happen. But until then, guys, if you want to check out any of the other content on my channel, well, I've got all of my horror movie reviews right there, and I've got all of my 2024 movie reviews right there.